If your baby cries intensely at the start of the night, becomes irritable, seems unconsolable, or only settles when held, this video is for you. Because crying at the beginning of the night is one of the hardest moments for families to get through, and at the same time, is one of the moments that communicates the most. I'm Mariana Friend, a child and infant sleep specialist, and on this channel, we focus on understanding a baby's sleep language before trying to intervene. Because sleep isn't just something we manage, it's something we interpret. Very often, evening crying is treated as a sleep problem, something to fix, something to stop. But it doesn't always say something about sleep itself. Many times, it tells us about the day that the baby has had. That's why, before trying to stop the crying, we need to understand what it's actually communicating. Crying does not mean something has gone wrong. For babies who don't yet have words, crying is a legitimate form of communication. At the start of the night, crying is often the body's way of transitioning from day into rest. It's not a breakdown, it's a transition. One of the biggest challenges with early evening crying is that it can look the same, even when the reasons behind it are very different. And this is where many families feel stuck, because from the outside, all crying looks like distress, but the meaning behind it changes how we respond. Today, I want to walk you through 3 very common layers behind crying at the start of the night. It's not always just one, and understanding these layers completely changes why it actually helps. One very common reason for early evening crying is accumulated tiredness. When a baby reaches the end of the day without having rested enough, their body is moving into alert mode. Sleep has arrived, but the nervous system cannot slow down. This crying isn't a refuse of sleep, it's an exhausted body trying to regulate itself. The beginning of the night can also be a moment of emotional release. Throughout the day, babies absorb stimulation, interactions, movement, sounds, experiences. When the evening finally slows things down, the body finds space to release the accumulated load. Crying here works like a release valve. It does not ask for correction, it asks for containment and presence. In other cases, early evening crying is linked to the routine itself. Bedtimes that are too late or too early, abrupt changes, rushed rituals, or too much stimulation close to sleep can make the shift from day to night harder. The baby senses the change, but does not yet feel enough predictability to move through it calmly. And here is where many families struggle, because tiredness, emotional release, and routine misalignment often overlap. From the outside, the cry can look exactly the same, so parents are left guessing. Is this overtiredness? Is this emotional release? Is this a routine? And when everything looks like distress, every response is starts to feel like a guess. Guessing creates urgency, not clarity. When crying appears, the most natural instinct is to try to stop it, and that makes sense. But when we respond without interpretation, we lose the message, and the crying often returns. Sometimes later that night, sometimes night after night, because the underlying need hasn't been met yet. When we understand what is behind the crying, our response naturally changes. Not because we follow a rule, but because we are responding to this baby. Sometimes the response involves timing. Sometimes it involves environment. Sometimes it involves adjusting the routine. And sometimes it simply means staying, with less urgency and more calm. That's the difference, and it matters. In my clinical work, I see many babies labeled as difficult in the evenings. When the day is adjusted with more awareness, the crying at the start of the night often softens, not because the baby was trained, but because they were understood. Interpretation doesn't happen in isolation. It comes from looking at patterns across the day, the week, and the family rhythm. Crying at the start of the night is not a problem to silence. It's a message to listen to. Tiredness emotional release, and routine don't ask for the same response. That's why there is no automatic solution. There is observation, there is listening, and there is interpretation. And very often, that interpretation begins during the day, not just at bedtime. If early evening crying has been difficult in your home, it might not be lack of technique. It might be lack of understanding. On this channel, I help parents understand sleep language. And in my work with families, I help apply that understanding to your baby, your rhythm, and your reality. Because when interpretation becomes clearer, intervention becomes lighter and sometimes unnecessary. That's when rest finds peace. If this perspective resonates with you, stay here. This space is for families who want calmer nights without losing connection. And if you ever feel you need support interpreting your baby's sleep, you'll find ways to work with me in the links below.